Welcome, New View first graders, to Math Module 5, Lesson 10, Telling Time to the Hour.
Okay, kids, today's learning goal for Lesson 10 is telling time to the hour. Learning to tell time is a very useful life skill. Here are some supplies you'll need for a craft at the end of this lesson. You're going to need a paper plate, a pencil, some paper, some scissors, some crayons or markers, and either a paper fastener called a brad or possibly a push pin, but make sure you get your parents' permission before you use a push pin. Okay, you guys, we're going to start with a round type of clock that you're familiar with. This type of clock is called an analog clock. Can you say analog? That's right, analog clock. We have this kind of clock on the wall in our classroom, and you might even have one of these at your home. Some watches that people wear on their wrist also have a small analog clock. In this video, we will learn how to tell time to the hour. An analog clock has two arrows on it called hands. There's a short hand called the hour hand. It points to the large numbers that you see on the inside of the clock. This hour hand is pointing to the 3. There's also a longer arrow called the minute hand. It's pointing to the numbers on the outside of the clock. Sometimes these numbers can be seen and sometimes they're invisible. The round part of the clock is called the clock's face. The clock even has a face on it in this slide to help us remember that. This clock face shows the hours on the inside. Let me get my pen. I'll show you those. Get my highlighter. So here are the hours on the inside. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Those are what we call the hours, and they're always on the inside. And then around the outside, we have the minutes. Now remember that sometimes on certain clocks, minutes around the outside are not there. They can be invisible. We just have to remember where they're at. And it always starts with the 00 up here at the top. There it is right there. I'll highlight that. The 00 is right here at the top. That's always the starting point. And always at the very bottom on the other side of the 6, we have a 30. So for right now, for first grade, the only 2 minutes that we're going to have to worry about are the 00 on the top and the 30 at the bottom. When you go to second grade, you're going to learn about all these other minutes, the 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. And I think we've talked about the clock on the wall by the sink in our classroom a few times. People have asked questions about it. And we did mention that the minutes, you skip count by 5s when you go around the clock. So you may have noticed that on here. But for first grade, the only thing you have to worry about is you need to know on the other side of the 12 is the 00, which we call the old clock, and the 30 on the other side of the 6, which we call the half hour. The next slide we have here is a bunch of clocks, and these are all analog clocks. And if you'll notice, all the faces on these clocks have the hours on the inside, and the minutes are invisible on 2 of the clocks. 2 of the clocks have little dashed lines, And those little lines are what help us to count so that we would know what the minutes are. And on the yellow clock, it has some of the minutes around the outside. Today, you'll only have to know the o'clock up here at the top. Okay, so for today, you only are going to have to remember what the invisible o'clock is on the other side of the 12. And then we'll be learning about what the hours are on the inside around the clock. There they are. So the hours are the easy part because we can always see the hours. Now we're going to learn to tell time on an analog clock. To tell time, first we have to look at the short red hour hand. Which number is it pointing at? Yes, the 3. The longer blue hand looks like it's pointing to the 12, but it's really trying to stretch really hard to go past the 12 and point to the 0, 0 on the outside of the clock. That's why this hand is longer, and we call the 0, 0 o'clock. So the time on this clock is 3 o'clock. This is how we would write it using words. Take a look at this next type of clock. There are also clocks that we call digital clocks, like the one you see here. See this type of clock? We see this one in our classroom on the back counter, and we see this type of clock in a lot of other places, like cell phones, maybe your alarm clock. Computer has one down at the bottom. Tablets usually have this type of clock. This type of clock can be much easier to read. The hour comes first, and it shows on this that it's 10 o'clock. Next, it shows the minutes, and it shows 2 zeros, and remember that the 2 zeros means o'clock. And the hour and the minutes are separated by these 2 dots. So this clock says that it's 10 o'clock. In words, we would write a 10 and then the word o'clock, like this on the bottom. Let's try reading some clocks together. First, look at the shorthand. Let me get my pen here. All right, here we have the short hour hand. What number is it pointing at? Yes, you're right. It's pointing to the number 5. What number is the long minute hand pointing to? Yes, it's pointing to the 12, but remember, that means that it's really pointing to the o'clock that's on the other side of it. That means that it's pointing to the o'clock. So the time on this analog clock, first we're going to say the hour, 5, and then we're going to say the minutes, o'clock. So the time would be 5 o'clock. All right, let's take a look at our next one. Remember, first we're going to look at the short hour hand, the red one right here. What number is it pointing at? Yes, it's pointing at the 9. Next, we're going to look at the long minute hand, and it's pointing to the 12. And remember, that means it's trying to reach out and point to the o'clock. So we would say that the time on this clock is 9 o'clock. Let's look at another clock. First, look at the short hour hand. What number is it pointing to? Yes, it's pointing to the 2. What number is the long minute hand pointing to? The 12? Yes. That means it's really pointing to the o'clock, the 00 that's above the 12. So that means that the time is 2 o'clock. Okay, last clock. First, look at the short hour hand. What number is it pointing to? Oh, it looks like it's pointing to the 12. What number is the long minute hand pointing to? Well, it looks like it's pointing to the 12 also. That means it's really pointing to the o'clock on the other side, above the 12. Now they're both pointing to the 12 at the same time. So what does that mean? Well, let's look at that again. The hour hand is pointing to the 12. The minute hand is pointing to the o'clock. So we would say that the time is 12 o'clock. That was kind of a tough one, wasn't it? They were both pointing to the same thing. All right. Now here comes the fun part. Here are the supplies that you were going to need. So you're going to take your paper plate, your crayons or your markers, possibly a pencil. You're going to need paper, you're going to need scissors, and then you're going to need some type of fastener. Make sure that you ask your parents for permission before you use the scissors or the push pin if you have a push pin. If you don't have either one of these, then don't worry about it. You'll have to do without. Okay, so you're going to take your paper plate and you are going to number the outside of your clock. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the number 12 right here. And then I'm going to go straight down. I'm going to put a number 6. And then I'm going to go straight across. And I'm going to put a number 3. And then go straight across from there and make a number 9. And now we're going to fill in the numbers in between. The next number, probably about a finger space, we're going to have a 1, and then a 2, and then our 3, and our 4, and our 5, and our 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. And now we have all the numbers on our clock. And if you want, you can find the middle and put a little dot right here. And now we're going to take our piece of paper, set our clock aside, and we're going to have to make 2 arrows. So I'm going to start out with my long arrow. This is going to be my minute hand. You can make it a little thicker if you want to. And if your arrow is too long later, you can always cut it and make it shorter. So I'm going to make it a little extra long to start with. And then I'm going to make my shorter hour hand. Make it a little thicker. Okay. And remember, if you make it really long, you can always cut it shorter. Okay. And now I'm going to cut these out. All right. Set that aside. cut out my long minute hand. And if you don't have markers or crayons, you don't have to make them blue and red. That's just to help you remember which one is which. All right. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, that's pretty good there. And yep, that's good there. Perfect sizes. Okay, now the next part is if you have a brad, you would poke holes in it and put the brad, but I don't have a brad or a paper fastener, but what I do have at home is a push pin. So if you've got one of these, you can have a grown-up help you. I'm going to take my push pin and push it through my hour hand, and then I'm going to do the same thing and push it through my minute hand. And then be really careful that you don't poke your fingers on the back of here. Make sure your fingers are out of the way. And then you poke a hole here. Now I've got this pointy part right here, as you can see. I'm going to try and bend that down. I'm going to take a piece of paper here and see if I can bend it. You're probably going to want to have a grown-up help you with this part because you don't want to poke yourself. Alright, let's see. It didn't bend very well, but I probably have to have a piece of some tweezers or something to bend that down so I won't poke myself. But this allows me to move the hands on my clock so that I can practice using it to tell time with. If you don't have anything at all, you can always just put your finger and hold it there and then move them around and do it that way to get the hands on your clock. Alright, so that is your clock. Also, if you would like to, on your clock, if you would like to add the minutes up at the top, where the O clock is, the 00, and then at the bottom of the clock, underneath the 6, you would write the half hour, the 30. Alright, like that. Alright, well there you go. That is your clock craft. Here is another clock craft. This one's got all of the numbers on it for you. It's got the arrows for you. If you don't have a paper plate and you would like to just print this out onto paper, if you go to our class website at mrscompostnewview.com, you can print this out off of the class website.
Well, that is the end of our lesson on telling time to the hour. Check out the next lesson, which is telling time to the half hour. And I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and I'll see you later. Bye!